you got to really follow the right people because things are changing so fast that if you're not following those people who spend their time doing this, you're going to fall behind.
Whoa, everybody. I am so excited that you joined us today because Liv Porter has got some interesting, scary, and illuminating information for you that is going to change the way that you are currently thinking about email deliverability. Welcome to the final installment in the 2023-2024 Life Sciences Dreamin webinar series. This is our last webinar session together before the big party, which is Life Sciences Dreamin. This year will be held October 9th through 11th in Valley Forge at the beautiful Sheraton. We've got so much fun planned for you, incredible sessions, deep domain expertise. We've got a fall ball Thursday night with a live band that is going to be super fun. And if you would check your chat, we are asking you to email Andrew at cloudadoption.solutions to be entered because we are giving away free admission to one lucky person who's attending today's webinar. I have to tell you that yesterday Liv gave Andrew and I the dry run of this webinar, and it had changed so dramatically since the last time we saw her speak on this topic that I was blown away. And she just informed me as she was coming on that she's already changed it since yesterday. And that is, Liv, I believe, because AI is changing minute by minute. So I'm not going to speak any longer, Liv. I know that you've got loads of stuff to share, lots of information. And so thank you for all the work that you're doing for us that are joining today, because I know that you've spent countless hours researching this topic. Welcome to the stage, Liv.
Thanks, Shannon. And I would just like to invite you, Shannon, to call me out if I'm missing stuff on the chat, because I know I'm gonna really get into my zone. And then I also want to let all you attendees know that I want to have a little discussion at the end. So bear that in mind, write the questions down and let's unleash it at the end. And that way I can get through all of the content, because I think different things are going to strike different people. So yeah, Shannon already said that I had to change since the last time I gave it. But yeah, I'm Liv. I do operations and partnerships here at Cloud Adoption. And I had the founder I was reporting into a few years back call me the Swiss Army knife of the company. And since then I've had a lot of other people call me that, which has been weird. So I'm adopting it now and embracing it. But when it comes to go to market, I love everything from marketing into customer success. And I find a lot of satisfaction researching on the technical side of the tools and making them as efficient as possible. A lot of what I end up doing with my clients is actually cutting their tech stack down significantly, where the fields are using down, and just boiling it to basics. And that's kind of what got me started on all of this. So we're going to talk through prospecting technology, the history of it, and how we got to where we are today. And then we're going to talk about what's changed in the last, really, it's been the last 2 years are the most changes that have occurred. And then we'll talk about a path for what's next. So jumping into that timeline, in 99, Salesforce came around, which changed a lot of things, but it didn't really change the way you and I buy things. It changed stuff on the business side. But when it came to what sales was doing with you and I, the buyers, not all that much changed. We were still calling and going door to door and maybe even faxing. And it's not until 2005 that businesses start using email as sort of the go-to thing for internal memos or maybe even updates to their customers, but it's still not really touching people in sales that much. It changes for marketing. By the mid 2000s, 2007-ish is when you really see HubSpot, Marketo, Pardot come about, and it becomes this new technology train everyone's jumping in on. But even email doesn't change all that much until 2009, when marketing email automation really starts to take hold. And that's when you start seeing those campaigns. And if you are a prospect or you go on the website, you're getting all kinds of coupons and information. But it still hasn't really come into the sales process until the 2010s. And so 13, 14-ish is when you really see SalesLoft and Outreach. 2015, Apollo comes along, and we have Zoom Info and these intelligence tools. And so you have sort of the staple of a sophisticated sales team being marked by this technology. So by the end of 2019, you can see a pretty predictable way to forecast your year based on your head count and the tools that you have. And so I verified this across a report Forrester had, SalesLoft had, Outreach had, which is what you're seeing right here. Across the line, if you're sending or launching about 250 sequences a day, you were getting these results. If you're doing them well, and doing them well wasn't that hard, really basic templating would do and could get you a 12% top line reply rate. The low end, you might see 7%, but that was the low end. The high end, you could see up to 20%. Email reply rates were around 3%, open rates close to 30%. If you kept that bounce rate below 3%, you were good to go. And so because of that, the play that made the most sense was volume. And so that's what a lot of people did. They put more SDRs in place. They kind of chopped up the sales process. So you had your marketing, you had your inbound, your outbound reps, your AEs, CSMs, or account managers. And that was pretty common because you could get a really high return by investing in outbound. And this is kind of the numbers that I was able to find and verify across many sources. People would sort of build out their models this way for their hiring plans for the year and have a sort of expected revenue associated per head. So there are some consequences to this. You send 250 emails a day out across large teams. Well, this is what happens. Marketing's doing it, sales is doing it. So from 2005 to now, you see a huge change. In 10 years here, you see almost a 5x change in the number of emails sent per day. And again, this is billions, 18 billion to now we're going to get close to 400 billion by 2025. So with all of this noise, things got more saturated. And so a lot of the tools that rose up amidst that noise were very seller centric. They were all about getting in front of the buyer. It was all about finding more buyers. And it's all about just like more and more volume mentality. And AI became woven into all of these. But just as AI was rising up to help the sellers, AI has made itself very present to protect the buyers. And this is where we see things really start to change for our go-to-market motions. And so now if you are sending that email to a cold prospect, you have a battle that you are fighting that you probably don't even see or know about because now AI is within internet service providers, email service providers, spam filters, workplace cybersecurities, and they're all using AI to detect patterns around what you're seeing. So most of all, the biggest thing that happened, October last year, Google announced it was going to change its sender guidelines. And so it moved from 3% to 0.3%, meaning you need to keep your spam rate from user reported spam below 0.3%. So again, that's 3 for every 1,000 emails you send. That's 4 days of the volume campaigns we were running. And if 3 people mark you as spam, you're sunk. So this is called user behavior. User behavior analysis is a huge thing that's going on with this AI battle to protect the buyer. And so when you send an email and your email is getting opens and replies and clicks, that's great. And AI is going to detect positivity around your email address, and it's going to mark you as safe. Whereas if your email is getting deleted, left with no replies, or even, of course, getting marked as spam, then negative patterns are going to be associated. And then this extrapolates across your entire domain. So if you have a bunch of people sending those emails, it can actually blacklist your domain, whether it's all negative patterns or there's some spam mixed in. But spam, of course, is going to be the end all be all. If that happens, you're done. So we entered this age of templates with sequencing. And this leads to the other area I want to show you of how AI is fighting us. I pulled this from Sales Off this morning. This is up there for helping to write templates, and it highlights 10 effective cold email subject lines. Now does anyone feel like this is a little outdated? Like if you saw this, you would delete it. Yeah, I don't know about you, but I'm deleting that for sure. Yeah, like if I see my name, uh, I'm deleting that, man. But I saw this on LinkedIn last week, and I just laughed out loud when I saw it. This is a CEO who searched quick question in his inbox, and this all came up. And so, whoopsie, the age of templates is probably over, because not only are you all really, really good spam detectors, pattern detectors, or dare I say bullshit detectors, but so is AI, because this is what AI is seeing. And when we're sending that template again and again and again, and somebody who's using a completely different domain, thousands of miles away from us, is sending the same subject line and the same similar body as us, and it's getting marked as spam, the one you're going to send is going to get marked as spam too. And so what AI does is look at that identical email you've sent out 250 times and probably mark it as spam if other people have sent similar patterns in their language out again and again and again. I came across this post recently, and it made me laugh because it's exactly what happened. In the early 2010s, when we were building these tools, the idea was, well, we want a sales process so repeatable, any idiot could do it. And then when we got, 8 to 10 years later, we're like, oh my gosh, these sales reps, they can't think for themselves at all. Don't need to spell everything out. And now we're at a point where a bot algorithm that regularly hallucinates and goes down all the time can do a better job than reps. And Errol's point here is that if you make the job robotic, a robot will do it better. And I cannot, if I'm going to tell you to follow anybody at all through this whole process, follow Errol. He's the only person who is sort of following the money here. He's doing his research completely de-incentivized. I checked reports from Outreach, from SalesLoft, Apollo, and while they're great products, the benchmarks that they have are old. They're from 2019, 2018, because if they say what their actual response rates are, it's not a pretty picture. It's not going to sell more licenses per se. So finding somebody who's sort of outside that and doing really technical research on their own has been really helpful for me. So yeah, Errol is great. So let's look ahead at the stats that we are now left with. We're going to compare it apples to apples from what I talked about earlier. In 2024, the top line reply rate that I was finding is around 3%. There are people who are getting better ones, and we'll talk about how and why and where you can look to do that. But if you're still using that same method of launching 250 sequences a day, you're going to see closer to 3% reply rates on your sequence, and then you go down to your email, it's going to be closer to 0.2. Email open rates, don't even track those. It's dangerous because of the spam bounce rate. So if you look at what happened 2 weeks ago, Google changed this. And now when you're adding that little 1x1 pixel image to track the email open, this is the message that you will see as the user. This is really important. I'm hitting report spam 9 times out of 10. Probably your other prospects are as well. So if you're trying to stay below that 0.3%, this is dangerous. So don't track your opens at all. Turn all of that off if you haven't already done that. But what does this do to this sort of volume play of the past? It's not pretty. And in fact, you're going to get a better result sending less emails than results sending more. And so you have to recalibrate everything in your strategy and the plan, because it's not going to yield the same results. The more you send, actually kind of the worse you do, unless you have what I'll show you in just a few minutes. So the pixel warnings, yeah, they're about 2 weeks old, Greg. All right, so should we stop using email? I have some theories on this that I want to share, and they're based on what I'm observing. So I'm seeing like sort of the paths that people are taking to solve this problem. I've tried to boil them down into something that's a little bit actionable and that you could put some strategy around for your go-to-market plan. And so I think that we shouldn't stop using email, but we do have to change. And you cannot do what you did before, no matter what. Your tech stack has to change. Your talent has to change. How you deploy AI has to change. And then you got to really follow the right people because things are changing so fast that if you're not following those people who spend their time doing this, you're going to fall behind. You'll waste money. So here are the paths that I've sort of boiling down and seeing across the board. There are still those who are making the volume play, the volume players, if you will. There are the personalization players, and then there are the network development players. So let's jump right in. Volume players. Now, there are people who are doing volume really, really well, and they're getting good success. They're getting similar to maybe what you saw before, or they're just sending so much higher volumes that their result, the overall yield is still the same. But in order to do this, you don't need that sort of factory method of SDRs anymore, of the marketing to SDR to AE. Things are really different now. So if you want to still do volume, you need a different kind of talent. You need technical marketing. You need sales app engineers, people who are integrating your systems across each other and automating all the little dots along your sales process. You might even need AI reps, depending on your buyer and your go-to-market motion. You're going to need AI assist throughout just about everything, but things I'd really want to highlight are sourcing and enriching, validating and qualifying. And by the way, you're going to need that for every single play, always. This is the most important thing, no matter what. Getting that right is where you should spend your time and resources. But anyway, if you're doing the volume play, you need to do it still. And you need authentication tools and warm-up tools, because in order to do this, you're going to burn domains consistently because people will mark you. You're sending more emails, you're going to end up in spam. So you always have to be having a new domain come up, and you can't choose a domain that looks spammy. You have to make one that actually looks real, or you're just going to start in spam. So those domains are expensive, and they take a lot of people to set up and execute down your sales org. And then, of course, you need to automate your sequencing and your follow-up. So flashing this here, maybe take a picture of it, but you can scan these, get a QR code of all these people. These are people who are worth watching. Jesse is a blend of things. He's really smart, and he's called a lot of this stuff out long before it ever happened. He was saying in October that you need to stop tracking opens. So yeah, these are all great people to follow, and they'll help you think through this motion, worth connecting with them. And then I want to show you sort of, well, what does this look like played out before we talk about the challenges? Because I think this will lead to the challenge as well. I saw this post. I thought it was a really good framework for how you might have to set up a volume-based sales play. You can see here, there's a lot going on. You're going to need lead sourcing, enrichment, qualification, copywriting, sequence setup, and email infrastructure, all those domains that I talked about, all the way boiling down. So there's a lot of tools going on here and a lot of different types of talent than what we saw before. Here's another view of that, and you can see just how heavy the technology and the process is to get this right. Integrations are huge. Sales, marketing engineers, if you will, need to be part of this process. And I screenshotted more of what his post says because he calls out the tools he's using. And so you can see this is a really extensive list, and there's a lot of niche steps that go along the way to make it effective. And you can see even more tools right here. So that brings us to the challenges of the volume play. You're essentially firefighting with technology all the time, because the email service providers, for example, are going to always be protecting their users and coming up with new ways to protect them. I use a tool called RoboKiller, for example. And I mean, this tool is awesome. Like if it detects that I have it set up so that if like someone political calls me or someone's calling and it's like a known sales, they'll actually have to go through like a robotic screening process. It's been great during the political season. And so there's always tools like that cropping up. There's always another license you're going to have to get. And you're going to be paying a lot of money for tech talent. You're going to be paying tons for subdomains. And then also things change so quickly that you're going to have to be keeping up with dinosaur contracts that might lock you in for things you don't need. You'll see, like, for example, right now, credit-based contracts are pretty prevalent. And so when you're on a system that's more focused on user-based, you might want to consider how relevant it is to the way you're going to market. But it really just depends on your business and what you're doing. And then also, volume-based plays are terrible for a limited total available market. Example, I worked in oil and gas for a little while. And they're not building new refineries every day. And so if you burned your domain and you're not actually getting in, or you're rejected from getting into like a certain business, whether that's hospital, oil and gas, power and paper, there's all kinds of manufacturing industries like this. It just doesn't work, and you won't be able to get in the door at all with email. So that's sort of the volume play challenges. And then we move to the personalization players. Now, these are the people who are writing really good email content that's highly personalized to the person or the business or the industry that they're in. And what I generally have seen with this play is that most people think they're doing this, but what they're really doing is a volume play to less people. Very few. I remember whenever in October, I reached out to a lot of people I know, like, hey, this is all going on. This is really going to affect your team if they had SDRs or they were doing that traditional prospecting method. I reached out to them and let them know. They're like, oh no, we're going to be doing personalization at scale. But really what you have is just like a lot of bad emails that are being sent to less people. So in order to do this play well, you have to have really good researchers who understand the industry and the business needs of the people they sell to, really good writers and storytellers. They have to be tech savvy because you still need a heavy tech stack for this. And then you need great enablement, because if you're bringing people in to do a personalized sales play and you want to do it quickly, you're going to have people who can train them really well and teach them how to tell really good stories. And then the AI assist still has to take place. No matter what you're doing, if you're not using AI to augment the process in some way, you're going to fall behind. Your competitors are going to be moving way faster than you. And speed to market is probably now more important than the volume that you're going out with. So sourcing and enriching, validating and qualifying, and then getting research summaries so you can understand really quick who is the right person to reach out to and why. And then, of course, worth watching on this, Will Allred, Kyle, Jen. I can't recommend Jen enough. She's hilarious, really creative. And she's somebody who demonstrates this all the time. She's always showing examples of how to do this, what she saw that worked well. So these are great people to follow on this if you want to stay ahead and actually write good content. And then let's talk through the challenges of this, because I feel like this is one everybody wants to do, but it's probably in some ways the hardest because we're constantly picking up patterns, and it's really hard not to repeat that or step into a pattern ourselves. So there's always going to be people, no matter how good your storytelling is or how good your product is, who are going to mark you as spam. So you're still paying for all those domains and working your way through them. And then only so much of your market will be buying at a given time. It's estimated, and I'll show you this in a minute, it's estimated that only around 10% of the market is in that zone, and only about 3% are really ready to buy. And so if you're doing lower volumes like this, you got to put the upfront time and probably money into finding the right people to start with. And then because of that, you still need a pretty heavy tech stack. So that's the personalization players. And then the last one we have is the network development players. So this is the one that I'm finding myself falling into most. And I'll talk through the challenges of that. But in this one, the talent that you need is a very, very intellectually curious set of people, because you're going after all the market, whether they are ready to buy or not, so that when they are ready to buy, they think of you first. And so in order to do that, you need somebody who asks really great questions, because I can't just like call Greg and say, hey, Greg, you want to talk? I need to have something to offer. I need to ask Greg questions and say like, hey, like, what can you teach me about what you're dealing with day to day? And so, and not only being able to ask those questions is important, but then being able to synthesize what you learn. If you're having 10 conversations with people who aren't ready to buy, there's still a lot to learn there. And so being able to summarize what you've heard and present it back to others in the industry is going to be really important to further that connection that you want to have across the ecosystem. Yes. Yeah. Happy to, Scott. And then finally, another thing you'll need is people who have disciplined follow through. A quick story. I was at very true, Greg. And likewise, if you call me, I'm gonna probably talk to my robot detector. So anyway, I went to a bunch of conferences in May, June, and July. And I talked to everybody. I love talking to the vendors, learning what their tool solves, why they're doing it different. And I am a dream for them, because if I know that someone I know has that problem, I'll introduce them. Or if I have that problem, I'll say, I have that problem, let's talk. But what I always do is I put the onus on them to follow up with me. And so I probably talked to over 80 people, and really in depth at these events. Anybody have a guess for how many of them actually followed up with me? Zero, some zero, zilch, 5, 1. 1 did. Which shows that this is a skill that you have to invest in and develop. Because I had meaningful conversations with a lot of them. I would venture to say around 15, which is a lot. I talked to over 80. And one person said, hey, great talk, let's follow up. Everyone else put me into their robot sequences or their robot email campaigns. And I'm not going to follow up now if that's how they handle it, right? So if you're doing this play, and AI assist is going to come in a different way, because you need really good sourcing and enriching. Your validation can maybe be a little more manual, or whereas before I said everyone should have it. Well, you probably should have it, but you can do a lot of more of that validation on your own. But you're going to need really good research summaries to know if this person's worth your time to go after, if they're easy to contact, if they seem like interested in having these kinds of conversations. And then, of course, you're going to need task management. Because, like I said, if you don't have all of your steps being automated all the time, then that falls on you. And so finding creative ways to follow up is really, really important. And there's great AI tools for that. And some people worth watching here, all fantastic, all really nice people too, which has been a bonus when they're talking to me. But Amy is somebody who, she demonstrates this. Whereas Alex and Mac, they are going to put a lot of content out, and they demonstrate it well also. But Amy shows you every single day how you can do this. I love watching her posts, and I really find inspiration. Like, it's not that hard. It's about consistency. And so I also want to encourage you to download the Network Development Representative Playbook by ComStor. Some of the data that I was able to get comes from this. It's one of the better things I've read in a while. Very creative and actionable. But it shows you here that if you're doing a network development play, you have 2 goals. Of course, finding those who are looking to buy, but you're also looking to engage the 90% that isn't looking to buy, so that when they are, you're top of mind. So there are challenges with this, of course. This approach moves really slowly. I argue it compounds over time, maybe more than the others, but it's slow. You might not get results for a year. And it can be challenging to measure efforts that aren't tied to revenue from a leadership perspective. Like, oh, what's this guy even doing? What's Liv doing at all these conferences? We can't tell what she's doing here because none of the vendors reached out back to me. That's why. No, jokes aside, but it's hard to measure that and justify it at times. And then also as a result, you need network development reps that are creators. And that's another skill. And it probably takes some trial and error. You have people who have to be disciplined enough to be creators, because like I said, if like I just go to Greg or Gail or Jeff and I'm like, hey, you guys want to talk? Okay. I have to have a reason to reach out and something valuable to give and contribute. And so that can be challenging. So before we move into discussion mode, I just want to remind everybody that no matter what, none of this matters if your domain or domains don't have proper authentication and setup. It's all else is out the window. So that's the number one thing. You can't do any email at all unless this is true. The prospects you're contacting have to be verified. You send a couple messages to somebody who isn't verified, then it's going to assume you are spam and you're just going to get blacklisted. And then the last one is if your domain is already blacklisted, then none of this matters. So if you don't know that, or you aren't sure what your spam rate is, you should look into that, whether it's you who owns it or your IT team. Google has really good postmaster tools that you should be able to detect that in. So sort of a thought before we move to the discussion time. Think through where your AI is focused along your process. This is sort of what we see as the actions that our salespeople and our marketing people are taking to go to market. And generally, the feeling I have is when a robot or AI is doing what I expect to be a human, I really don't like it. So if I'm like talking to a bot, it makes me mad. Or if someone's emailing me, I'm like, this is a bot. I don't like that at all. So I can tell you, I focus on the sourcing, signaling, verifying, and qualifying side of AI in terms of what I'm going to invest in on my process, because the researching, writing, sequencing, automating can get pretty dicey in terms of the buyer experience. And I don't feel like it's being done well by anyone just yet, depending, again, on what it is you're selling or buying. There are some products that you might buy that just a robot does fine, but more complex sales, I think it's a little bit different. And then also there's great tools for task management and prioritization, but it doesn't matter what tools you have if you don't have a really clear understanding of your goals and your strategy. And then you can use those tools to sort of fill in those gaps. And so I want to let you know, if you're feeling like this is daunting, I'm happy to have a conversation with you about it, just because sometimes brainstorming is really helpful. So please feel free to add me on LinkedIn and we can talk. Or if you want to book a meeting with me, down here, you'll see is my meeting link. But what I would challenge all of you to do right now is evaluate the path you feel like you're on and the path you want to take. Is it high volume? Is that the right fit for you? Is more of a personalized approach right? Or is more of a network development? Maybe it's a blend of all of them in different ways. But no matter what, you're going to have to evaluate your talent and your hiring plan accordingly, and evaluate your tech stack. Do a tech stack audit. Understand what they do, where there's overlap, and what they don't do well. Because there's a lot of platform solutions out there that are not doing what a point solution does a little bit better. And so I think it's important to consider, like, okay, well, maybe you have Apollo, maybe they do something another point solution does, but the data is really bad, or something like that. So just consider how well these platforms that you have are doing and when you need to bring in some assistance. And then connect with the experts. Like I said, this changes every single day. I live and breathe this stuff, and my tech stack is behind, and I feel the burden of that, especially after the last couple of weeks, really diving back into this. It changes really fast, and there are people who are. And then finally, like I said, book some time with me. Let's chat. If you want to chat, I don't want to like focus too much on tech because I don't think that's the goal of this at this point, but take a picture of this Loy TriKit. TriKit is free. It's fantastic. It's Errol's company that he's working on just to test all of this and do some really great reports and analysis. So TriKit's great, Loy's great, and Clay Lead Magic, all tools worth checking out if you don't already have them. So I'm done now. I want to talk. I would love to hear any thoughts you guys had along the way, any challenges this brings up for you. What are we thinking?
Liv, I have a question that came through that is asking you to clarify the difference between this network development rep, this idea of an NDR, and what we traditionally would associate with as a partner account manager.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I guess what I would argue is that the partner manager is selling to partners. Like they're going and they're saying, here's why you want to be a partner with me. Versus a network development rep is getting to know those buyers and saying, here's why you want to work with us someday. But for now, I'm going to give you all of this really good content and resources and value. And then our time will come. Let's just have reciprocity.
That's great. We have a comment from Scott that says GTM Fun Podcast mentioned a stat. It now takes 25 touches to land a meeting. Huge erosion and not sustainable. Wow.
Yeah.
Agreed. Yikes. 25 touches to land a meeting. And I think that ties back to the comment that Monica put in that now thinking about buyer personas is even more critical as we start to hyper focus on our target again. And I think, before we started looking at personalization at scale, which to me sounds like an ironic
Oxymoron.
things that, yeah, it is an oxymoron. In our early principles of marketing classes, we probably all learned about segmentation, target, and positioning. And that idea of the STP scale kind of went away as everybody was throwing tech at multiple different prospects. And so what do you think the future is here, Liv, when we think about getting 25 touches, tightening up our buyer persona, and being able to personalize on a more one-to-one level?
Let me just add another dirty layer before I answer that. And that is the idea that the research I found is that it takes around 1,000 touches to land a meeting, or not a meeting, an opportunity. So you might get that meeting in 25, you might not, but I'm seeing those numbers are way higher. Let me give an example. My aunt, it's my mom's aunt. My great aunt is like 77. And what she told me is like, I am terrified of AI generated images. How are we ever going to know what's true? And I told her, well, Aunt Mary, image photos have been part of human existence for this long. Very short amount of time, a little over 100 years, 200 years. But we've known about truth and we've still had truth forever. And so I think it's going to come down to credibility again and again and again, and reputation and all those things. I was talking to Bill from PS Solutions, and he kind of laughed and was like, everything that they're talking about right now is just what we've been doing in sales forever. Like, this is just, it is what it is. So I think it's not as scary as it seems, but I think learning to augment the right part of your sales process with AI is what will make a difference for you, helping you remember to follow up with people in a personalized, personal way. So that's where I see it going. And we're going to sort of fizzle out on this idea of like, I got, I got $10 million and we need to scale it to 50 million in order to justify. So like this like numbers breaking down, it's going to go away. And we're all going to have to get out on a really good product or a really good service and building that reputation out. So it slows things down, ironically.
It's wild, isn't it? How, trust and authenticity continues to be at the forefront of particularly sales and marketing. Jeff says, I love the idea of reciprocity. How do you balance reciprocity and the long play against sales targets and short-term pressure?
This is where I hate how much I always go back to the challenger sale, but it is what I often go back to because I feel like you don't have to choose. You can be generous and give and also draw lines that say like, I can't keep doing this unless you start giving back. And we can create ecosystems where we truly can help each other. And when it's not, sometimes you do, Jeff, have to step away when it's not beneficial, like standard partnerships. But I feel like it comes back to, again, the idea of credibility and building really good products and honesty. Because in my past, I've worked with products. This is my first time working with services. And so both are so messy. And it's funny, I find across both, being willing to tell the client, like, hey, this was a mistake, let's fix it, is something that makes that long play actually come home a little shorter or faster.
That's wonderful. That's so good. And I think we're always thinking about how do we retire the quota and reduce the pressure on what's expected. And I think it follows along with those Mr. Rogers principles of do the right thing. And in light of that, Greg's telling you thanks for being a conscientious capitalist, and he's such a good person living those values. And another comment that I want to pull out that I think is critical is Monica saying, be careful not to focus buyer personas on titles. Not all titles are created equally. And that is such a good point. Thanks, Monica, for bringing that out. And Liv, I think this is something that you're probably running into as you're thinking about this idea of scaling, where a director of marketing in one company is not equivalent to a director of marketing in another.
Yeah, and because I'm making a network development play, I tend to sort of think of it, and there's different things that different people touch. We'll use director of marketing as an example here. So like, let's say across our company, you have stages of influence on execution, process, strategy, and the vision. And so at maybe a really small company, someone who's a marketing director might be touching all of those. Whereas at a huge company, maybe there's, 30,000 people who work there, and you talk to a director of marketing, they might actually mostly just touch execution. And so understanding the size of the company you're working with, the goals of the company, you might have a very small company that doesn't want to scale and another small company that really does, or a large company that's trying to scale. And so understanding the areas that people really focus their energy across that execution, process, strategy, and vision stage, I think helps you contextualize your messaging a little bit better.
Contextualizing the message is what it's all about, right? And that's why this idea of just tossing AI or large scale, plays against a bunch of people doesn't work, because we haven't contextualized it for them. I think the old what's in it for me continues to remain, and we lost that in that 2010 rush towards hyperscale emailing,
Yes.
which really just created a bunch of spam.
Yeah. Well, I just want to remind everybody, if you're wanting to attend Life Sciences Dreamin, we are going to be giving away a free ticket. So email Andrew at cloudadoption.solutions. And I think that's a wrap, unless people have more comments or questions here.
I know you, Liv, because you are a great example of a network development professional, that if anybody has any questions, they can reach out to you on LinkedIn or email.
Yes, please do.
Liv, this is beautiful. This is wonderful. You're right. It did change from yesterday. So yesterday when you did the dry run and we were surprised it had changed from a few months ago, look at this. It's changed even more in 24 hours. So thank you to everybody who's joined us today. Thanks for all of your interesting questions. Liv, thank you so much for all that you do. You are a magnificent and wonderful representative of trust and authenticity in marketing and sales. And I, for one, am very glad to know you.
Thanks, Shannon. All right. Thanks, everybody.